I've been thinking much about that, how Charles Dickens has this ambiguity with him, or at least the way he's perceived. In one way, he is so much celebrated. He has been on the pound bill, the British pound bill. He is all his novels have been made into movies and everything. He's very celebrated, but among so many intellectuals, it's kind of embarrassing to enjoy the work of Dickens. And there's so many single examples, like Virginia Woolf, who lived at the same time even as Dickens. She said that if I met him on the street, I would not have dinner with him.
Okay.
Because she was very much into that literature and art, she said, was supposed to have some impact on society, to have this political message to it. And that's not Dickens. Although he is critical towards many things happening in the society, with how children are treated, how the poor are treated, but it's in a very humane way. So after reading it, it's not so much necessarily that you want to change society, but you want to change yourself. So people have read Dickens, and people who lived at the same time as he did started celebrating Christmas. That was not popular during Dickens' time. It was kind of it was looked at as something that the poor people celebrated just to have some little joy in their lives, but it was not romanticized, or it was not something that everyone celebrated and wanted to be like good to each other. But he definitely made, with A Christmas Carol, made Christmas into something very personal and something that something very sentimental. Now you can see at Christmas time, even in Norway, who have a population that is very unsentimental. During Christmas, everything sentimental is allowed. It's allowed to watch sentimental movies. It's allowed to decorate your home, to decorate yourself. Everything is so things that one would look at as being pathetic is allowed during Christmas, and that is very much thanks to Dickens. And I think that's something that is interesting to discuss and try to argue for the values of being sentimental, because he is, as you say, so extremely sentimental. And Oscar Wilde said, after having read
Little Dorrit, wasn't it? No.
No, the Old Curiosity Shop, where Nell, the main character, or at least the central character, dies at the end of the book. Spoiler alert. He says it's impossible not to cry when little Nell dies. It's impossible not to cry of laughter. Because you think it's so sentimental, so ridiculous. And that has been in academia and among intellectuals, it has been kind of lurking beneath the praise of Dickens. It's not
because
it's not kosher to,
because it's writing in that period where the whole fine art principles established themselves. So it should have been more so-called modern, and that becomes sort of the embarrassing part of it.
Yeah.
I mean, but think of Christmas Carol. It is a fantastic illustration of this mythical idea of, you know, it sounds so politically correct to have like a bad guy who loves money, and that sounds very, very political. But as I've understood from Joseph Campbell, the point is not the money, but that he is too attached to the time. So basically, he's thrown out to this grand mythical landscape, and you only get that through that great intensity, great sentimentality, and great ground emotions. And I was reading Bleak House, and maybe I should just read something from it.
Yes, please.
Because it's, again, a spoiler alert, Esther Summerson turns out to be the daughter of Lady Dedlock, who is the image of the contained, speckless, noble woman. And we don't have to go into every detail, but this man who loves, or is in love with Esther Summerson, sees the similarity between Summerson and Lady Dedlock and visits her. And so it becomes, she understands that that's her daughter. And she's married to Sir Leicester Dedlock, who is also typical nobility. And of course they don't have children, he's much older than her. And they're in this grand house in London. As Sir Leicester basks in his library and dozes over his newspaper, is there no influence in the house to startle him? Not to say to make the very trees at Chesney Wold fling up their knotted arms, the very portraits frown, the very armour stir. No, words, sobs and cries are but air, and air is so shut in and shut out throughout the house in town that sounds need to be uttered trumpet-tongued indeed by my lady in her chamber to carry any faint vibration to Sir Leicester's ears. And yet this cry is in the house, going upward from a wild figure on its knees. Oh, my child, not dead in the first hours of her life, as my cruel sister told me, but sternly nurtured by her, after she had renounced me in my name. Oh, my child, my child. And that is, I mean, you can't get more sentimental than what he's doing here. And but also this animation of things and Rembrandt-like portraiture in the description of the characters, spending a lot of time just describing how they act without it being, again, without any real action going on.
It's In one way, it's easy when living in these times that criticize the sentimentality. It is easy to see why he's criticized, but I do think it's a value to manage to see beyond that and actually look for what. How can I say it? What appears so obvious when you read it? Because when reading it, when reading Dickens, many of the scenes that are so sentimental, they do bring joy to the reader, and it is, at least during Christmas times, very popular to watch movies made or series made out of Dickens novels, but still he has this. He has a lot of characters where one of them or some of them are really good. They are like saints almost, and he's criticized for being one-dimensional in his character description. I totally disagree with him, or with the criticism there, but that's one of the criticisms, and also that the villain is often very evil instead of being more complex. But I just think that's getting into the wrong track in a way to start looking at those kind of those kind of judgments that are easily made on literature of today, where everything is, or very much is supposed to be internal, but he describes very much the actions of the characters. So the characters are developed through what they are doing or saying. And
I'm thinking about, I heard or I read somewhere was some contemporary novel, and I'm thinking of what I've read in Nietzsche's Birth of Tragedy, this thing of the Apollonian and the Dionysian, having it together. And you can see that there are contemporary authors that devote a lot of time to sort of formulating a sentence, and it's sort of like a purely aesthetic relation to it, where to show that they're good at making words cling, right? But what you find in Dickens is that all of these descriptions enhance the character, enhances the story. It's not just to show that I'm good with words, right? It always drives the story somehow. And I remember reading. It's all a twist, isn't it? Unfortunately, I read it in Norwegian. But there's the scene where this woman is beaten by her boyfriend, and as he is beating her, he is described from, what's the word is being used, that he's her boyfriend or whatever, and then suddenly the murderer does this. The murderer did that before she's dead. And that's the thing that you find in also in Ibsen, right? That things are pointers that are really quite clear, but still it creates a immense drama. And that's how you can manage to do that, to have clear pointers to some, because that's a really quite clear language, right? He is a murderer. He will become a murderer, but he's been called a murderer before the fact, and that he pulls it off with no problem at all.
Yeah. And another aspect that is interesting is how he has this faith in humanity through his novels. Although he's so, as we have talked about, he's so critical towards the system, towards the law, or the practice of the law, and towards all the poor people and how the children are treated. And but still there is some, as an author, he's almost it shines through that he's shocked in a way that the world can be like that, or that humans can be like that, and that is something else than criticizing society like with a fist. It's like not that he's angry at how it is, but it's more that how do we let this happen with our common men? And as you say with Lady Dedlock and Sir Leicester Dedlock, these very rich people that one can at first glance think that maybe, it's criticizing the high society and everything, but they are good human beings. They are just trapped in their situation. Lady Dedlock didn't know about her child, and she dies from regret and from shame, from how she has ended up treating her daughter, and also how, and I think that's the relationship between Lady Dedlock and Sir Leicester Dedlock is, to me, one of the greatest tragedies in Dickens. How Sir Leicester actually loves her and loves Lady Dedlock, and she has this mask on her whole life. Imagine having that mask on, your whole life just to keep the facade and just to and thinking that if he, who is like the number one in society, if he found out how shameful I have acted by getting a child with my first love outside of marriage, he would leave me at once and disgrace me, and I have to have this mask for his sake and for my sake and everything. And in the end, he would not have cared.
No.
He would have accepted
doesn't it
her.
say something like that? If she only knew how little I cared.
Yes.
I would have cared if it had come out.
Yeah, and that is so. I think that's so central to his authorship.
Yeah, and that's where you have this thing about, again, I always come back to that persona, the mask, and what is behind it. And that's what struck me, is because it's so primal. So she goes from this perfect mask to this wild figure stretching her arms up, and it's left, thou shalt, completely, and it's completely, sentimental. So it's you can read Dickens, and in the same way that you see Hilaire Repin's I'm the Terrible, and think, oh God, what happens? What could happen if you follow the rules of society as very obediently? Your life becomes a complete tragedy, right? And you can see that in Dickens and really learn from it. And it's also so jumping from one thing to another, but actually, first time I started reading Bleak House, as I got stuck in that description of the law case, the Jarndyce in the beginning there. But I didn't get into it, so now reading it again. Speaking of, that is a way of making things into what do you call it, a conscious being. This law, this lawsuit, that just eats people, and how it becomes a matter of destiny. There's no stopping it. It grinds and grinds and grinds. And how is this? The description about, I think that's where the snow falls or whatever, or it's the soot from the factories or whatever falling down like a veil of sorrow or something like that. It's a grand perspective that he lays out there, and he has. I mean, I think he's one of the best at characterizations.
Yeah. When
you have all of these people that have these ideas of helping other people, this societies that they're engaged in, and what's her name with Boreobola, someplace in Africa, where she still help these people, and of course her house and her family is just completely in a mess. I mean, not just like in a bit cute way, but I mean in a catastrophic way. So how she just not mistreats, but don't treat her children, and her husband, who is so used to just being run over that he, at the end of a meal, he would typically try to say something, and they're just, no, it's no use, not say anything. Yeah. And then when you have Caddy, her daughter, who sees she has to get out of this, and she falls in love with Mr. Prince Turveydrop, like who the hell gets that kind of name? And she wants to marry him, and then it happens, and then the father is like, remember, don't have. Like, what father? What? Yeah. What should I have? Shouldn't I have Prince? Because she's taking a big step. She loves them, but she has to move on. And like, don't have great plans. It's like, don't do it, because you destroy the world around you. Yeah. So I mean, in that sense, like you mentioned, it's not this description of Lester Dedlock. It's not like, oh, here's an evil capitalist or evil upper class guy. because you could equally well see him as completely slaughtering all those people with good intentions. Because in that in that wedding, when all of this, of course, they know other people are engaged in this great plans for women liberation or whatever it is, and none of them, first of all, cares about their own family or the cause of the other people that have their great cause. So that they don't really care about other people, and so that's basically what he's slaughtering. And then like you mentioned, what he's coming in with is this individualism or this humanism, to say, look at that person, no matter how rich you are, whatever. I mean, that's a strange notion today, but
Yeah.
that's basically what he's doing. It's like not picking sides as such.
When I heard that Dickens was highly influenced by the philosopher Thomas Carlyle, I very much made sense. Not that I know too much of Carlyle, but he was very not obsessed, but very interested in the actions of the hero or the great man. And he said that all history has been made of great men. And if you remove the actions, or if you remove the importance of the action of great men and replace it with a recipe, an idealistic recipe, you dehumanize society. So, and there's so much in that value statement. To replace the actions of great men with ideology, with a recipe, you dehumanize society. And that is at the core of Dickens' authorship, I think. And you can see it in what you said. She, who cares about the children in Africa, is driven by ideology. And therefore, everything else is dehumanized for her. Her family and everything is...
And it's so great because Caddy, who is Caroline, I believe, who marries Prince Turveydrop, she hasn't been taught anything, so everything is a mess, right? But she understands she has to take herself together to learn, housekeeping and all of these things. And so Esther teaches her. And she's basically illustrating this whole idea of Jordan Peterson, clean your room, and how that can make people around you react if there's no culture for that in the family, right? So she pulls herself up on her own accord, by her own will, and I think that's where you're talking about. That's when you're talking about what Ayn Rand says also about what literature or whatever can do for you. You have these ideas, these images in your head. If she can do it, coming from that level of society, then I could do something similar, right?
Yeah, and that was actually one of the criticisms from Virginia Woolf of Dickens, was that after having read a novel by Dickens, you want to change your own behavior. You want to become a better human being.
How would that be?
Because you have to change society, not yourself.
Oh God.
And so they are on the very opposites, I would say.
And it strikes me that he is, if you should put it very popular, in a populistic way, you could say that why you read literature is because you get somehow like free experience. You get to experience it emotionally, and that is almost, well, not almost, it's a bit easy to say it like that, but it gives you the sort of the experience of having done it, right, or having gone through it. And I'm thinking of for example, in Great Expectations, that he's so good at it. When he meets what's his name, who's been a galley on the galleys. Anyway, his benefactor. He thinks it's I forget all the names. He thinks it's this rich one, right? it turns out that it is that slave or a galley slave that he helped when he was a little boy. And he has then tried to distance himself from his uncle, who is of course very low class, and try to be very fine. And when this former prisoner confronts him, he's like, "But I didn't demand you to distance yourself from your family."
Yeah.
Oh shit! He just did it because he thought it would be accepted in high society, right? And then there's a situation where he understands that, you know, all of this, again, like that Lady Deadlock, all of these rules, following the rules of society, is just killing your life, killing your possibilities. Yeah. And I think that in that way, Dickens fills that mythical function that realigns you with what is eternally valid and not just. And that's another argument you could say, that because of course he is very much placed in a time.
Yeah.
So you could use him, you could use Ibsen, you could use Andrew Wyeth to say that, you know, you can make eternal masterpieces out of something that goes on in a specific time.
Mm-hmm.
Have you thought about anything about that?
Yeah, not to me. It just it's placed in a setting that is his time, but when reading it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, so I'm not sure how he manages that, but he does in a specific way.
Well, I guess it's the same as with Melville then, that he animates it and makes it so grand. I mean, like this suit, whatever, falling down as an example of grief. Then it's no longer London in that specific year.
Oh, so you were not thinking about the paragraph with fog everywhere, the introduction?
Oh, but that
because that's
please read it.
Fog in the introduction describing London. Fog everywhere. Fog up the river, where it flows among the green aids and meadows. Fog down the river, where it rolls defiled among the tires of shipping and the waterside pollutions of a great and dirty city. Fog of the Essex marches. Fog on the Kentish heights. Fog creeping into the cabooses of collier brigs, fog lying out on the yards and hoovering in the rigging and great ships, fog drooping on the gunwales of barges and small boats, fog in the eyes and the throats of ancient Greenwich pensioners wheezing by the firesides of their wards. Yeah, and more fog.
In the beginning there is so amazing how he starts with, you know, describing the courts, and then he sort of, it's like when I think about it without repeating everything he says, it's like he flies over the court and then takes one sweep and comes back to the Lord Chancellor and takes another sweep, and it goes steadily more into the specific thing that he's going to talk about. And I think that's perhaps part of the key, that no matter what it is that is being described is being, well, like you just read too. Yeah. Fog is becomes something with a will. And whatever year it is or when these buildings are made, they are subject to fog.
Yeah, and also to go back to your question about him being having a setting of his time. Maybe he succeeds doing that because he is sentimental. Yeah. Because he has managed to. It's actually a masterpiece to manage to create Victorian London. He creates the understanding of Victorian London.
Yeah, he does.
And that is a masterpiece to do when living in those times. He manages to see it from the outside, sort of. That's how I describe that. I would see Victorian London if I visited it being from today and going back there and seeing these all the different characters, and that was the capital of the world at that time, the largest city by population, and in the most powerful nation on earth. It was the center of the world, and it's so easy to just criticize it instead of doing what he does, creating this magic around it, although making it into not a magic, one-dimensional magic of being just something entertaining, but also something tragic, also something with this very unique atmosphere. Just imagine if you were supposed to write a book or paint something or make a movie out of a place today and make it as Dickens does with London. How would that be, and what city would it be?
Thank you for checking out this clip from the Cave of Apelles. If you want to watch the entire segment, head over to caveofapelles.com/donate and become a $5 patron. That will allow you to access all our Dark Flame episodes, bonus material with our featured guests, and more.